Hello, and welcome to the Gut Club's podcast. Today we have, really for the third time now, Stephen Wright from the Healthy Gut Company. How are you today, Stephen?
I'm doing great, Keith. Thanks for having me back.
It's an honor and a pleasure. I always learn when we talk. The first two conversations we had were about Tributyrin X. You're a very progressive Tributyrin supplement. I think you're one of the first people to actually put Tributyrin on the market. Am I right?
We followed a couple other companies, but we're the first ones to bring it out in a liquid with an enteric capsule that's patent pending. So
Okay. Okay. Well, now you've launched HoloImmune. That's what today's program is all about. My name's Keith Bell. I'm founder of the Gut Club. Before we begin, I want to give a shout out to my son, Kyle, who provided the first ever merch of the Gut Club. This is a one and only prototype hat. It's very simple. I like the design. And you know what, Stephen? Sometimes less is more. And that probably applies to paraprobiotics, which is a term that people, by and large, have not even become familiar with yet. What they basically are heat-killed bacteria, and they have the ability to modulate our immune system. They retain that ability. So I like to say even dead bacteria are good bacteria. I like what you transmit, what you convey on the Healthy Gut website, something like how a smart immune system is better than a strong one. I think that's very provocative. So HoloImmune is a paraprobiotic with 3 strains of lactobacillus and that are heat killed, and also beta glucan, which is a prebiotic. We can talk about after we talk about the paraprobiotics. Congratulations. How long ago did you launch this product, Stephen? Here, I happen to have a bottle on my desk. I'm on my second bottle testing it now, and I'm impressed. It's actually seemingly opening up my airway passages. That's but I've talked with people that have had great response, and especially in terms of the microbiotic gut-brain axis. We're going to talk about mechanisms. But when did you launch this product, Stephen?
So it was under development for about 18 months, and then we finally got it live earlier this year. I think around February or March of 22, we were finally able to go fully live.
Wow. So it's what, about 6 months now that you've had it on the market. Are there, I haven't not seen other paraprobiotic products on the market. What else is out there?
So you can get, for instance, one of the strains in there, Amuse, which is one of the cooler strains and has the most human research data on it. You can get that in isolated capsules from certain companies. I don't believe you can get the other 2 strains in isolated capsules, and I'm not aware of any other companies who've combined multiple paraprobiotics in a capsule yet.
Wow. What kind of research did you have to go through to determine which 3 paraprobiotics to put in your formula? Because I've been doing a lot of research. There's actually a ton going back, to I've seen paraprobiotics actually defined in a 2011 paper. I'm not sure how far back heat-killed probiotics are in the literature. Do you have an inkling about how far back this goes?
I think that the Lactobacillus L92 that's in the product is one of the first ones, and I think some of their studies are in the early thousands. But yeah, 20 to 25 or so years is kind of when they first started to be published in journal papers.
Mm-hmm.
And really exploding in the last like 5 to 6 years. And so basically, this project kicked off in February of 2020, and you can all guess what was happening at that point in the world. And I wanted the best immune system I could have. And I have a lot of background in sort of like crazy protocols from biohackers and from naturopaths and from mavericks who are way out there. But even looking at those protocols, they didn't really like fill me with a sense of like hope that I had everything figured out. So I was doing just a deep review of the literature and how the gut impacted the immune system, because it's just kind of the lens I naturally gravitate towards. And when I ran across the paraprobiotic literature, and then I started looking into them and realizing, wow, that there's quite a few strains out here. There was at the time, maybe I found around 10 to 12 different strains that were like had some decent human data. So then I started narrowing it down to strains that had human data on upper respiratory tract infections. And so I started with that sort of framework of I want to narrow in on stuff that's been studied not only in animals, but in humans, and it's shown benefit for upper respiratory tract infections. And then from there, I started to realize that many of these paraprobiotics aren't even commercially available, and which is why there's hardly no other competing products out there at the moment. Maybe this interview and many others like this will hopefully begin to build the market out in a deeper way. And so in a way, I started to narrow it down to which ones are commercially available, which knocked me down to like, I think 8 or so. And then from there, I was choosing ones that I thought would play well together. And so, for instance, these 3 kind of have one that has really cool data on Th1 support, another one's Th2 support, and then the third one, Amuse, is kind of sitting over top of everyone. So they had the most robust human data, they had the studies I was looking for, and they seemed to mechanistically, they might play well, was the theory. And so it really was just a giant experiment. And then so we launched it to our community. We tried to enroll a bunch of histamine and very sensitive folks to find out if there would be reactions. I had no idea. I had no idea if people would notice things. The companies, all of these strains are licensed. That's why there's studies on them. So these companies, pay a lot of money to build a trademark around these strains. And so all 3 of the company's scientists were like, no one's ever done this. This is a cool idea, but we have no idea what's going to happen. And so I really didn't know if people would notice it, or if they would just take it and it'd be like another one of those, immune support supplements that you're like, I think I should be on this, but I don't know if I need to be on it. And I think we got a little lucky, but there was a lot of preparation that went into that.
This is probably one of the biggest and most important lessons that we can gain from the pandemic. It's microbial regulation of immune response. And a lot of people are still missing this. Probably most of humanity is still missing this lesson. If we miss this lesson, that gives us a lot more to do in our lives. So, I tried to find research about paraprobiotics related to COVID, and found one review that begged the question and talked about there needing to be further research. But so far, I have yet to find any research about paraprobiotics preventing or treating COVID-19.
Yeah, they definitely don't, and I'm not saying that in any way.
No, we can't say that. But what's interesting is there's a lot of literature, probably 1,000 papers or more about the gut and related to severe COVID. Go ahead.
Here's what I'll say about that. This is where one of the messages I really want people to take away, whether or not you try HoloImmune or anything else I do, is you want an immune system that's smart, not strong. And that's like a reframe. That's like the redo of what we've been hearing for the last couple of decades. You want your immune system to use a feather if it needs a feather, a hammer if it needs a hammer, and a jackhammer if it needs a jackhammer. You do not want to mix those up. You don't want to reach in your toolbox when it's time to break up concrete and try to go out there with a feather or a regular hammer. And same to be said, if you have, you have to brush the dust off of something, you don't want to use a jackhammer. It's not going to work very well. And I think what we have and what the pandemic showed us is we have a bunch of bodies walking around that are out of tolerance with the outer world that they're living in. They are out of tolerance and they are not able to recruit the right tools inside of your immune system to handle the world. And so what I believe is paraprobiotics are one of the best tools to help smarten up the immune system to allow it to be more tolerant to what's coming in and choose better tools when the time comes.
And a lot of the research speaks toward potential that paraprobiotics could actually be safer than live probiotics. And for someone who's out of balance or out of touch, as you say, with the outside world, then this could be something that people should consider having in their toolbox, because a lot of people cannot tolerate live probiotics. In fact, almost anything you put in a sensitive gut, you can have an adverse reaction. But I'll tell you, I gained immediate respect for live probiotics back in 2009. I was treating a dog with a seizure disorder, and after going the antibiotic route, realizing that was only helping temporarily, I started my Add Life campaign, and tried probiotics for the first time. They rapidly caused seizure. And now, with some research that we're going to be talking about later, I think I understand the potential mechanism being the microbiota gut-brain axis with respect to the vagus nerve and the vagal afferents of the gut, and how microbes have access. So, I
I think,
go ahead.
yeah, I think you're speaking to something very important, which is there's a lot of humans out there who cannot tolerate they can't tolerate fermented foods, they can't tolerate live probiotics. They their immune system and their gut is so sensitized that this could cause, for a lot of people, it can cause like histamine related things like tachycardia, flushing, immediate diarrhea, things like this. And I think the thing that I'm trying to, and you can tell me if you like this analogy, but it's something I've been trying to put out in the world for the last month or so, is that paraprobiotics are literally different flight plans for your immune system. They really are just information packets. They are immature cells. They are not adult cells. So they have a different cell membrane and a different cell receptors than what the adult live bugs have. So they're not only dead, but they're different cell membrane, different receptors. And those cell membrane makeup and the cell receptors are different flight plans or different bits of information for our immune system that help it with its tolerance inside of itself as well as with the world.
Well, let's go back to what these paraprobiotics actually are. I think it's fascinating that science was able to discover that using immature bacteria was, and they I think what they did is discover that they could kill them at this stage of life, where they retained these receptors or things that can activate our host receptors. That's just amazing. So they're basically smaller than. Here's another less is more analogy. They're basically
Yeah.
basically smaller than a mature probiotic. In fact, I was amazed to see one of the strains, which is L. Let's see, it was the amuse strain, lactobacillus,
Lactococcus
rather
lactis.
lactococcus lactis. You know, there are 100 billion cells, and this is all in one capsule. So, my understanding is the paraprobiotic, it doesn't necessarily have to be a whole cell. It can also be a fraction of the cell. Do you have any ideas about the three strains, whether or not a large part of these are fractional or are they whole cells? Any idea?
I've never thought of that question. I never asked them that question. I do know that each company's scientists did find which part of the life cycle, so they're not all like, say, 5 days old. There's not like a standard out there for paraprobiotics. It's each strain. Again, this is why, we'll keep talking about this on and off throughout this call, but why the probiotic industry and what we're putting in our bodies is going to continue to get more and more specialized towards the strain, because these scientists are putting in an immense amount of work into, how old are they, what do they live on, what were they grown on, things like that. And so I think it really ends up mattering quite a bit according to the research.
Wow. It just dawns on me as we speak that lipopolysaccharides, which are part of the cell wall of gram-negative bacteria, are kind of like the anti-paraprobiotic in a sense. They're the toxigenic form of the cell wall. And it's also known, I think, fungal cell walls are important. These things are also in research as vesicles that are used in vaccine adjuvant research. Because it's known the properties are all about microbial regulation of the immune response. What's missing in the literature with regard to vaccines, however, is adverse reaction as caused by this microbial regulation. So that begs the question, have you ever, we're talking about safety here, have you ever seen an adverse reaction to a paraprobiotic?
Yeah, yeah. And again, I can only speak to HoloImmune. But we have, we offer a 60-day money back guarantee. We have health coaches on staff to take calls and talk to people about what's happening for them. And I think we still have about 2% or so refunds on this product that we're happy to give back to people. And I know of a few cases of mast cell activation syndrome who were activated by this product. And so
okay, so a lot of people are going to be interested in that. So basically in your instructions, I think you say, if you're sensitive, break open the capsule and just sprinkle a little bit on food.
correct.
And low and slow really is the thing, to do for anything new. You have to start with very low doses to avoid an adverse reaction. And that even applies to paraprobiotics. So
yeah, another analogy of this is it is kind of like going to a trainer at the gym for the first time in a long time. Like, you don't just go back in the gym and run 5 miles. You have to walk and you have to build up tolerance. And so if you're someone who has mast cell activation syndrome or is extremely sensitive to the world around you, you're on a limited diet, almost every type of medication or supplement is a potential reactant with you, then you are on that far of the spectrum. I don't know what side, but somewhere out on the spectrum of somebody who should go low and slow with this product. The people who are more tolerant, like they've figured out some of their ways to deal with the world, they don't seem to have a problem, and this ends up usually helping them. And we have a lot of really cool testimonials and reviews of people who were sort of stuck in that loop of not being able to add in more foods, or stuck in that loop around like skin rashes or hay fever or something, or all these things of like tolerance to the outside world, kind of like being so close to having it all figured out, but not quite getting over the hump. And then adding in HoloImmune as part of their whole regimen has gotten them that next layer that they were really searching for.
Well, I'm very excited to have this in my toolbox. I've never had any adverse reaction to it, but I have to say my breathing seems to be improved from it, and I was not expecting that. In fact, I didn't know what to expect. I'm not treating any particular health condition other than getting old. But of course, everyone's out of balance to a certain extent. I like to think of myself as a walking compost heap, and it's my responsibility to stay in balance. Stephen, I got to take my hat off to you. My God Club hat.
The Gut Club.
Yeah, let me take my hat off to you, Stephen, because you've been doing these things for well over 10 years. I think you were a pioneer of low carb dieting with a specific carbohydrate diet, the SCD diet, back in 2010, I believe. Is that right? Is that the right year?
Yeah, we wrote the first ebook in 2009, and it was live in 2010. Yeah.
Wow. So, and here you've launched Tributyrin X, the butyrate supplement, and now HoloImmune. You've got a nice, really array of gut health supplements at Healthy Gut. We're offering, as an affiliate, $15 off and free shipping. There'll be a link under the video for people that would like a discount on the product and give it a try. So I happen to think that there are synergies between your products, and paraprobiotics like HoloImmune can shift flora by way of regulating the immune response. We're going to talk about, what that might look like, the potential scenario. I'll share a screen in a moment. But live bacteria can also raise butyrate. The butyrate supplement itself can shift flora toward gram-positive, Firmicutes, which are largely the butyrate producers. The Clostridia, clusters 4 and 14A, is where they mainly reside. Butyrate is such a big deal. The more I learn about it, the more fascinated and the more I realize how crucial it is. There are some people out there that don't believe the phylum level analysis is useful, like the Firmicutes Bacteroidetes ratio. I'm one of those that puts a lot of stock into it. In fact, it's the first thing I look at when I see stool test results. By the way, anyone out there would like to learn more about stool testing and the things we're talking about, please join our group on Facebook. It's the Gut Club Stool Test Discussion Group. It's a hive mind of, gosh, we've got now over 10,000 people, many of which are very smart and active on the page. More than half the reason I started the page back in 2015 was so I can learn from other people. And sure enough, I do on a daily basis. Please join us, the Gut Club Stool Test Discussion Group. In fact, someone gave a testimonial for HoloImmune the other day that floored me. I mean, the almost instant well-being they felt in their brain health. This is someone with severe brain fog, and they were contemplating whether or not this could be lasting, or is it just kind of a transient phenomenon? I like to believe that it can last because of the way paraprobiotics can potentially shift flora in the right direction. Why don't we go to a screen share now? Let me share this screen, make sure you can see me here.
I mean, I think, and just to suggest that several of the strains, the studies suggest, for instance, in the rashes studies on the L92 strain, or the like watery eyes, itchy nose, sort of like allergies to grasses and pollens and things like that. All those studies suggest that the longer you're on the product, the better those symptom scores are. And so most of the studies don't go beyond 12 weeks, unfortunately. However, my belief is that it's somewhere in the middle, right? Like I do believe we are going to the gym in a way. We're increasing tolerance, and the studies suggest that. And whenever the time comes that you've built up this new level of endurance or muscle or whatever you want to call it, tolerance, strength with the world, coming off the product, I mean, there should be a change from that as well. But hopefully you'll be at such a much higher level that it won't be one of those things that you're on, every day for the rest of your life or whatever.
Yeah, you've just inspired a question in my mind I'm going to have to look into later as to whether or not there are infant studies using paraprobiotics. This could actually be a good ethical solution to infant gut health as opposed to using live probiotics, which some people might be concerned about, shifting things in the wrong direction on a long-term basis.
I'm not sure. I do know that I believe Amuse was studied in kids above 2. So right now we tell people please don't give it to your kids below 2. And again, this product has not been studied. All 3 strains together have never been studied. They have not been proven to be safe for kids. They haven't been proven to be safe for quote unquote anything or treat anything. This is a new concept. It was sort of a brainchild of my anxiety and sleepless nights trying to figure out the gut immune system. And so we hope to gather a lot more data, and from the Facebook group, even from the gentleman who had a really nice brain response, or woman, I can't remember who it was. I think it was a gentleman. He even posted a study that I'd never seen. So I'm learning just as quickly as everybody else. I mean, I have a bit of a head start because I focused on it for a little while, but no doubt we need lots of minds looking at this from lots of angles.
Well, Stephen, your personal health challenges, which stem from childhood, have really turned out to be a blessing in disguise because it's inspired you to help so many people. You should be proud of your work. I've said that before. I don't mind saying it
Thank
again.
you.
There is actually a study showing that paraprobiotics raised butyrate producers and butyrate production in children. I'll show you that later when we screen share. Let's talk about a couple of mechanisms. There are 2 of them that I'd like to discuss. The first one is about Peyer's patches in the gut and how paraprobiotics have access to that system, which creates our immune cells. And the second is about microbiota gut-brain axis. So let me share this screen. This is on the Gut Club Facebook page. Oops, that's the wrong one. Hold on. Oh, wait a minute. That's it. Okay. This is on the Gut Club Facebook page. I just posted this earlier this week. We've been posting actually for several years about heat-killed probiotics. When I discovered heat-killed probiotics uh, several years ago, I was floored that even good bacteria, can be dead bacteria. Even dead bacteria can be good bacteria. However, that's really such a barbaric way of putting it, but it's true. So basically, we're looking at a study that showed how this actually can be accomplished in the Peyer's patches of the small intestine. These Peyer's patches are basically like the beginning of our lymphatic system. They are the entryway to our lymphatics. And that's also where our immune cells are born and are accessing systemic circulation. So the way it happens in this chart in a nutshell is a heat-killed paraprobiotic can actually be recognized by dendritic cells, which are producing cytokines, including T cells, such as T helper cells in this chart. And they're also known, by the way, as CD4 cells. And this can lead to IgA production. And this is basically immunomodulation, which can then balance flora, in my view, for an overall improved metabolism. So in a nutshell, that's what this chart's about. Um, what what are your thoughts on this, Stephen? Is this something you've been considering too?
I'm still, I'm still learning. I'm still learning about Peyer's patches. I'm still learning as much as I can about the immune system. I haven't focused on that much in my career, and it's quite a complex thing. But yeah, I find the cytokine and then the T helpers and then how they kind of like change everything downstream to be crazy fascinating. The HK137 or the LP20 strain inside of the product actually has been shown mechanistically to do a very similar thing as this strain, which is boost IL-12 production. I do believe that in a way, how this is working is that it's sort of giving your immune system different directions or different flight plans, if you will, about how to deal with the inside of the gut, which then will change. It will change the flora. In fact, that strain, the LP20 strain, that company is very rapidly spitting out research. They just did one on metabolic syndrome where they showed some mild but positive beneficial benefits over the placebo group for people with metabolic issues, as well as skin, like loss of skin, water, and things like that for beauty. And so you're affecting essentially the entire body, I believe, through cytokines and through dendritic cells, through the immune system. And I think that's just wild, amazing. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it.
Yeah, you mentioned LP20. That's one of the strains in HoloImmune that you chose. That's a Lactobacillus plantarum cell wall, basically, or a whole cell. It's probably a combination of both. I'm a big fan of Lactobacillus. I used to say that bifidobacteria are the Rolls Royce of the microbiome, and then I added if bifidobacteria are the Rolls Royce, then lactobacilli are the Lamborghinis. I mean, they're like the guardians of humanity, and I'll only give one example as to why I believe that. Because lactobacillus are known to comprise up to 95% of the healthy vaginal flora. Now, if that's not being a guardian of humanity, I don't know what is. That's and they're so important for so many parts of the body. We should do a separate podcast herald, just heralding lactobacillus in general. They're, and they may actually be endangered in a lot of ways, similar to the way people are saying H. pylori are endangered, and also bifidobacteria have been found to be decreased over the past century. I believe due to environmental toxicity and things like pesticides. And go ahead.
You remind me of a really interesting story that I don't know what to make of, and I haven't known what to make of it for the last 12 years or so. But when I first started this stuff back in 09, I was in a lot of Yahoo groups and message boards just trying to figure things out. And there was a really nice nurse who dealt a lot with the autism community and the specific carbohydrate diet and supplements as well. And she was well known at the time. Her name was Pam Farrell, and I have no idea if she's still out in the world, and I have no idea what she's published since then. So if she's gone a different direction or thinks really bad things, forgive me. But at the time, she was very nice and very helpful. And she told me that back then, this is 09, 2010. So the products were different, right? The access to strains was different and the knowledge was different. But they would actually, if they had a really, really messed up gut, they would never start with bifidobacteria. They would always start with a lactobacillus only product and then build the gut out that way. And I've never really known what to make of that because bifidobacteria has gotten such an awesome rap over the last 6 to 8 years. Like everybody's about bifidobacteria, but I just always remember that, and I've never really figured that out. So it just came up when you were talking about how important lactobacillus are.
Interesting. I actually view it as the opposite, that lactobacillus seem to have an ability to cause inflammation, whereas bifidobacteria may be calming the inflammation. So I always try to recommend, if they're taking a multi-strain probiotic, one heavily weighted toward bifidobacteria. So I've got the opposite view, but still, lactobacillus are so crucial. They're doing so many things. They're important for lung health. I mean, you talked about the respiratory health and paraprobiotics. Well, we did a podcast a couple months ago with a scientist who's developed lactobacillus probiotic. It's also 3 strains designed in particular for lung health. And he's also developing nebulized probiotics for direct application to the lungs. Lactobacilli, lactobacilli are also antifungal by way of the immune response through dietary tryptophan. That alone is amazing. Have you seen any research about paraprobiotics being antifungal?
I haven't looked into that or come across it.
I just began looking. I couldn't find anything yet, but there are mechanisms that are plausible.
Yeah. So I mean, if we're boosting secretory IgA or any other gut defensin molecules, and there's a active infection in the small intestine, you would hope that the body would help get rid of it or regulate it down to the appropriate levels better. I just don't know that that's ever been studied.
Yeah. On this chart here, because I've left it up while we're talking, so that people don't see me and I ruin their lunch. This is a section here, the germinal center. Germinal centers are something I'm beginning to learn about. I was inspired to put more research into it when I saw a COVID study. They were doing autopsies showing that germinal centers were not developing in severe COVID-19. That makes me think that they're not being activated because they're missing these protective microbes that are stimulating that whole system of B cell activation, leading to IgA production. So this paper actually is pretty recent. It's 2021. And this is what we do at the Gut Club. Part of what we do, we post photos and have in comments. This photo was just posted a few days ago, really just 2 days ago. We're up to 25 comments now, and it's an interactive way to learn. People are asking questions. I mean, it is a club after all. That's the idea. It's like an interactive diary where people can go back and learn, and then we can update these photos and post the latest research. Why don't we go through a couple things here, that are some of the comments on the photo. This is a 2021 review that I found that mentions paraprobiotics and COVID. This is the brain research. Let's go. You know what? Before we go through that, let's go through that. This brain research and paraprobiotics. I was able to find one research paper which was published, I think it's 2020 actually, and it is all about comparing how live probiotics activated brain regions. I'm going to try to put this in a way that's fluent. It's pretty heavy duty stuff here. They compared live probiotics with paraprobiotics and how the vagus nerve is activated. And they found that both live and paraprobiotics were able to activate the vagus, but the live probiotics were changing regions in the brain that were widespread. However, the paraprobiotics were found to alter only one particular brain region, and that's the PVT. It's known as the paraventricular nucleus of the thalamus, which happens to be a really important center of the brain. You can see on this photo where it is. It's basically at the center of the brain. And this study found that that the paraprobiotics were affecting that region only. That's not to say that all paraprobiotics will do this, but this is an important part of the brain, the PVT, because it's all about regulating emotions and behavior. And if that's not enough, not only that, but the PVT is also connected to many other regions of the brain, including the amygdalas and the hypothalamus. I mean, it's quite widespread in itself. That to me spoke toward potential for safety. I mean, when a live probiotic is activating, widespread regions versus a paraprobiotic was able to focus on one particular region, maybe that's the mechanism behind why a live probiotic caused seizure in my dog 12 years ago when I first tried them, where a paraprobiotic might have had a different result. I don't know. This is pure speculation. I want to make a speculation alert out there for people that are considering this. Stephen, have you put a lot of thought into how paraprobiotics are affecting the vagus nerve?
I mean, I just seen the study this morning before we got on the call here, so I don't know much more than what you've just stated about it. But here's what I can say. So probably 25 to 30% of our customers have been reporting neuro benefits. For instance, my fiance, bless her heart, she believes in what I do, but she doesn't necessarily like taking pills. And if she doesn't really feel anything, she doesn't love it. But she is somebody who was taking HOLOIMMUNE and noticed that she plays a lot of word games, those games where you guess the words and stuff, not crossword style, but like the whatever word games those things are. I don't really play them, but her scores were significantly higher in the days she was taking HOLOIMMUNE, and she started to notice that. And so she started kind of like really gravitating towards it and using it as a bit of a nootropic, if you will, or a way to feel smarter on days when she wanted a boost. She would take 2 of them. And so she loves the product still to this day. And then we noticed that her use of Claritin was declining, and basically she hadn't used it in a few months now. And she's, I wish she wouldn't take Claritin, but hey, if you're all stuffed up and you can't breathe, I get it. And so I think what I'm fascinated with is what are the cytokines, or what are the modulations that are happening in that dendritic cell Prior's patches that are then going up the vagal nerve, and what are they modulating in the brain? Like, that's more of what I had been focused on, not necessarily on like electrical activity in certain regions or something like that in the brain. I'd been more focused on what might, IL-12 do in the brain, or what might happen if, say, someone was very low on T helper or T suppressor cells, and we were able to balance that. How might a brain change based on those types of things?
Wow. Yeah. It's interesting to consider how the gut is basically hardwired to the brain, through the vagus nerve. And also there are things called neuropod cells. Um, I'm not sure there's research about paraprobiotics and neuropod cells. I started looking, but I didn't find anything yet. Um, but this hardwiring aspect might explain why the paraprobiotics are basically acting so quickly. You know, uh, they're
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how you think of it, but I really think of the immune system kind of as like the communication pipelines to the rest of the body. Um,
Mhm.
in a way, it's like your various channels of WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger and text and email and all these things. It's got all these different channels that it sends signals and information out to your skin, to your eyes, to your brain, to your lungs, to your feet. I don't know, all the different places. And if we change the signals in the gut, which is where the majority, I believe, of the signals are put together and packaged,
Mhm.
then I don't think it should be a surprise that we're seeing all these weird changes in these various body parts that are far away from the gut.
Right, definitely. A lot of that has to do with things like the neuropathic pain studies, peripheral pain that actually originates in the gut. Um, I wonder if there are some ways that pain is modulated by paraprobiotics. Um, that's another
I don't know.
fascinating thing to look into. There are so many rabbit holes, as you say. Um, okay, why did you call the product HoloImmune? What does the holo refer to?
It
Or you
refers
pronounce it
to
holo. How do you? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, holo. It refers to the word whole or moving, and holos is usually used to describe moving towards wholeness. And so, in general, when I'm designing products for myself and for the world, I'm trying to design them in a way that is going to move the body back towards more wholeness, regardless of the out of balance. And so,
Mm.
I fully believe that everybody falls on a bell curve. There's outliers on either end, and so we need to design products if we can to take them into consideration, because 34% of people are way outside the standard deviations of normal and can have, they're typically, I think, actually the people who need the most help. And so holoimmune is my take on, can we move the immune system more towards a more balanced wholeness.
Yeah, um, that's beautiful. By the way, the study that we're talking about here with the PVT, this is it. I just want to show people. It's the vagus nerve is necessary for the rapid and widespread neuronal activation in the brain following oral administration of psychoactive bacteria. That buried in this paper from 2020 is the information about paraprobiotics. Um, this study is the early one I mentioned, 2011. They were calling these paraprobiotics ghost probiotics in the very beginning stages, while they were defining what a paraprobiotic was. They called the paraprobiotic concept. Have you heard this term, ghost probiotics? That was
Yeah, yeah.
provocative.
I mean, it's definitely eye catching, right?
Yeah, made sense. Um, I, I'm glad that that did not stick as the name for paraprobiotics.
I
Um,
agree.
um, but other things I have up on my screen. This is, uh, a 2020 review about the PVT and how it's an important node in the emotional processing network. It's a review article. Um, this is another review from 2021 about how the PVT is connected to other parts of the brain. Um, this is a different subject altogether that I want to touch on because we're also promoting tributyrin and how pH is important for butyrate production. Well, lactobacillus can regulate the pH and lower pH, um, which can be better for improving the butyrate production from Clostridia. However, there are some mechanisms for that we touched on earlier with regard to immunomodulatory benefits of paraprobiotics that can result in butyrate production. So, there's another there's another study here that is all about Lactobacillus acidophilus opening the door to butyrate. it's about butyrate absorption. They found that live bacteria were able to do this, but not heat-killed bacteria. So I think the point that I'm trying to make is there are benefits to both live and heat-killed paraprobiotics. So, but I especially like to think that paraprobiotics could be a great tool for people with especially sensitive guts.
Yeah, yeah, and I would just echo that. I would echo that. This is not me saying that live probiotics are bad or anything like that, or paraprobiotics are somehow like on a pedestal way above live probiotics. It's to say that hey, the science has gotten pretty clear now that paraprobiotics or these heat killed versions do different things than their live counterparts, or and so we should move away from as much as possible this just total nomenclature of probiotics and move more towards talking about the species like you've been pushing for, Keith, because at the end of the day, I think in 10 years from now, you're going to have a product that, who knows, maybe it'll contain live and dead probiotics, but they'll all be targeted towards butyrate
Wow.
or sinuses or eyeballs, or there's a paraprobiotic that helps with eyesight. So like that's where the world is going, is let's figure this out mechanistically. Let's figure this out. Let's move the data from mice to humans to verify that it does translate, and then stop doing these giant like 50 billion, 150 billion multi-strain things. If you want multi-strains, and I think people should, eat the Gut Club's kefir, eat some real sauerkraut, get your live multi-strains from food, and take targeted bugs for whatever issue you want help with.
That's a fascinating viewpoint. I love the idea of combining in one product paraprobiotics and live probiotics. How interesting. I wonder if the paraprobiotic would affect in some way the live probiotic. Oh, there's, this is like inner outer space here we're delving into. This is the paper I mentioned earlier about a heat-killed lactobacillus that raised butyrate levels in children. This is fascinating, from 2017. I see Jack Gilbert, who's one of my favorite researchers, University of Chicago, on this paper. I should reach out to him and talk about paraprobiotics. Just fascinating. In fact, you mentioned our kefir. We're producing kefir grains. And I even saw a paper about heat-killed bacteria from kefir. I grew up saying kefir in Chicago, but I learned the correct way was to say kefir, and now I wince inside every time I say it. So anyway, here's our new page that's all about the things we've been discussing from thegutclub.org. And here's where you can find links to our discount. And please give it a shot. Stephen, you know what? I'm going to put my hat back on just so that I can take it off again.
Thanks, Keith. Thanks for all the kind words, and thanks for just doing the mission that you do at the Gut Club, which is furthering this dialogue about species and how might they relate to other things. You asked a question I didn't even think about, which is how might a live and a dead bug in the same pill interact with each other. I didn't even think about that.
Oh, well, it's all about asking the right questions, I think. The answers are easier than the questions sometimes. How's that for cliche? You know what? Let's wrap it up by talking about beta glucan. We forgot to talk about that in the product. Why did you add beta glucan in HOLOIMMUNE, and is it a substantial dose?
Yes, it is a substantial dose. You can look at the research on beta glucans. It's a 1316 product, which was chosen specifically. I know that there's plenty of literature out there on only 13. There's some literature on only 16, and there's superiority claims, but the bulk of the research has been done on a yeast-derived 1316 extract like what we have. And much of the research is between 100 milligrams to 500 milligrams per day. And so I chose 250 per capsule. the reason for the beta glucans specifically was I wanted to know for sure we were going to boost secretory IgA. And the research, beta glucans does a lot of really cool stuff in the literature. It's quite an amazing product. If you've never tried beta glucans, I would highly recommend playing around with it. Really cool. Just sure, it's a prebiotic, but it has immunomodulating effects as well. And one of those is mechanistically upregulating secretory IgA. And so my belief was, hey, we may upregulate secretory IgA with these paraprobiotics, but I don't want them to need to do it all by themselves. And I love what beta glucans does from a prebiotic / immuno changing, modulating thing. And it's kind of the same. It's kind of the same thing, right? It's just from yeast. It's parts of the cell walls from yeast versus cell walls of bacteria.
Yeah. I happen to do particularly well, personally on mushrooms. I'm not talking about psilocybin mushrooms. I mean dietary mushrooms. And I don't know. Let's do a whole show on mushrooms someday.
Yeah, and have you tried any of the beta glucans extracted from mushrooms?
No, I haven't.
Okay,
No,
that might be a fun test.
Yeah, as a prebiotic and immunomodulatory
Correct.
thing. Wow. Yeah, that would be cool. That was one of the first things I tried with this dog in 2010 that I keep going back to. I was actually into child health way before that in the 80s in Chicago, where I'm from. I was a UNICEF spokesperson. But then when a health crisis comes your way, you start to learn about other things. And that's where a lot of people get their motivation, from hardship. So, Stephen, from Palm Beach County, Florida, with love, I want to thank you once again for joining us. You're in Colorado. No, you're in Arizona right now, right?
Okay, yeah. We're in Scottsdale at the moment, headed back to Colorado in a few days.
Okay. Well, have a beautiful homecoming to back to Colorado. And thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for all you do on the planet. It wouldn't be the same without you, Stephen. Keep up the great work. Thank you so much. And thanks to Healthy Gut. You have a great team there. It's nice working with the team. I want to do a shout out to Beth. Thank you very much, everyone. Thanks for joining us. This is Keith Bell from the Gut Club signing out. We will see you next time. I just have to figure out how to hit.
Thanks, everyone.
Oh yeah. Okay, beautiful. Thank you.
And if you have other questions, support at Healthy Gut. We'll get back to you with whatever we can.
Fantastic. Thanks again, everybody. Take care.